Okay, hello everyone. Um, Given Anderson Silva's positive pre-fight drug screen for anabolic steroids in his recent fight against Nick Diaz, I have decided to address the issue of steroids and performance-enhancing drugs in sports, and more specifically in MMA and the UFC. Okay, this is my first video on here, so please just bear with me. Okay, this is an issue I have been concerned about long before this happened. Okay, apparently the MMA world is just taken by storm, they're shocked, surprised. Well, for those of us who know and understand how widespread the use of steroids are in sports, we're not surprised by this stuff. We're not shocked by this. We're surprised when people are not on steroids. Okay? So, um, I have some notes here. So I apologize if I glance down and read from them, but it'll help me stay on topic and hopefully not forget anything. So I'm going to basically break this down into two sections, okay? The use of performance-enhancing drugs in MMA and the UFC, sports, but more specifically MMA, and then also their dangers, their implications, and then solutions for eliminating them from competition. Okay, I apologize if I ramble or if I get off topic or if I say the same thing twice. Okay, and you should know this is not going to be some sensational video where I show you a bunch of people all jacked up on steroids and play a bunch of techno music, okay? Okay, I'm not not going to sit here and speculate on what fighters I think are on steroids or why I think that, okay? This is a discussion to seriously address this issue. Okay, now when we're attempting to come up with serious solutions to this problem, there's no room for speculation, okay? First of all, we don't need to speculate on this stuff. There are enough UFC fighters themselves, commentators, and analysts who all say how rampant the use of steroids are in the UFC. And secondly, there are enough UFC fighters themselves who have tested positive for, more specifically, not just banned substances, but steroids, performance-enhancing drugs. Okay? We need to separate, okay, the use of recreational drugs such as marijuana, which is technically illegal, with the use of anabolic steroids. Okay, now marijuana is banned from competition simply because it is classified by the federal government as illegal. Okay, it does not enhance your performance. Okay, anabolic steroids, on the other hand, are designed specifically for this, to synthetically enhance your physical performance. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of a background on myself. Okay, I know I look like I'm about 18 years old, but I'm 30, and I'm a father. Okay, I've been following the UFC for over a decade now, okay? Way before, the Ultimate Fighting reality show came out, which basically made the UFC as popular as it is today. Okay, I studied Weichiru Karate for 8 years, and I also served in the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division. Okay, and it's no secret that the Army's main fighting style is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I've been trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu by the U.S. Army. Okay, and I've also dabbled here and there in a number of other martial arts, in the gym with instructors, Taekwondo, a little bit of Krav Maga. I'm also about to compete in a triathlon to benefit to charity organizations. Okay. Secondly, I'm almost done with a 2-year degree, 2-year college degree to transfer to the university, hopefully to go to medical school. Okay, and I'm also trained in what's called advanced cardiac life support and pediatric advanced life support from the American Heart Association, which deals with emergency resuscitation drugs. Okay, so I'm not just sitting here commenting or saying something about issues that I have absolutely no knowledge of. Okay, I have more than a basic education in both biology and chemistry. Okay, although I am not an expert in any of these matters. Okay, now that that's out of the way, okay, let's deal with the issue. The MMA analyst Robin Black recently appeared on the MMA News broadcast show Fight News Now, okay, and he made a very good statement, okay. As he's well aware, steroids are widespread in sports in general, okay, and basically what he said is we need an honest discussion of this issue, okay? Not something sensational, okay? And that's what this is intended for. Okay, if you're going to make a comment, okay, make sure it's intelligible, okay? Don't just come on here and defend steroids or say something ridiculous, okay? This is a discussion aimed at attempting to solve this issue, and hopefully this can contribute to that. So, okay, let's be real, people. Okay, steroids is rampant. Steroids are rampant in sports, okay? Steroids are basically the dirty golden secret of sports, okay? And people are coming to find out that, the ugly truth, and that is that they're idols, they're heroes, they're all frauds, they're all cheats, they're all built up on steroids. Okay, our Lance Armstrongs, our Mike Tysons, our Jose Cansecos, our Barry Bonds, okay, and in this case our Anderson Silvas, okay. Excuse me. Okay, they've all been exposed for what they are. Okay, these heroes are not heroes. Okay, the NHL player George Laraque has addressed this issue in the NHL, the National Hockey League, and he's calling for more stringent testing. Okay, the professional tennis player Roger Federer has called for more stringent testing in tennis. Okay, in a survey of professional golfers that can be found in the Golf Plus edition of Sports Illustrated, okay, a significant number of professional golfers said that they believed that Tiger Woods was on performance-enhancing drugs. Okay, that's a little bit of a background. Now let's get into, more specifically the MMA and the UFC. Okay, now there are a number of fighters who have all said that steroid use is widespread within the UFC. Okay, perhaps the most prominent example is George St. Pierre, who needs no introduction. Okay, back in December of 2013, George St. Pierre vacated his championship title. Okay, he gave it up. Okay, and because he said that steroid use is widespread in the UFC. Okay, and he also said that the UFC has a monopoly on MMA. Okay, now I'm not sitting here saying, GSP never did steroids or anything like that. I understand people have some issues with that, but let's just focus on his statement, okay? Okay, now these 2 points that GSP made are, in my opinion, probably the most significant statement about MMA, okay? The most significant statements regarding the sport in general, okay, especially the UFC. Okay, again, what did he say? He said steroid use is widespread in the UFC, and the UFC has a monopoly on MMA. Okay, now, some people might be able to connect the dots, okay? But if you're not able to, let's follow this and let's look at the implications of what GSP is saying. Okay, essentially the implications are, okay, that if the UFC has a monopoly on MMA and steroid use is widespread in the MMA, essentially what he's saying is, if you want to compete in the sport of MMA, you basically have to take steroids, okay? Those are the major implications of what GSP said. Okay, now the UFC fighter Mac Danzig, okay, he appeared on a Joe Rogan podcast you can find. He also said the same thing, basically. He said that basically everybody is doing steroids. There are clean fighters out there, absolutely, you know, and we need to support them, and we need to get behind them and get behind their efforts to clean up this sport, okay? Now, Joe Rogan himself numerous times has addressed this issue, okay, and he's not shy about saying that steroid use is widespread, okay, it's rampant in UFC. Now, let's deal with some of the fighters themselves who have tested positive for banned substances, performance-enhancing drugs. Okay, so we have Hector Lombard, there's John Fitch, Sean Shirk, Hermes Franca, Stephan Bonner, Vitor Belfort, okay, Royce Gracie, Chris Lieben, okay, and now Anderson Silva. There's many more you could obviously throw in the mix. Okay, it would basically, that's just some of the fighters in the UFC. We'd basically be here all day if we were trying to list all the professional athletes who have tested positive for steroids or who have admitted to using steroids. Okay, even the legend Frank Shamrock admitted to using steroids. Okay, excuse me. Now, Robin Black also made another very important point. Okay, he said, you know, we can basically go on witch hunts and go after individual fighters, which is not going to solve the issue, okay, or we can step back and look at this problem, the whole problem, okay, because when you do, you see that it's systemic, okay. Now, for some of the implications of this and what this means. Okay, now, on a segment of UFC on Fox that was posted to YouTube on February 4th, the UFC fighter Kenny Florian, he was on to talk about, you know, the fallout of Anderson Silva's use of anabolic steroids. And for anyone who's not aware, Anderson Silva tested positive for 2 anabolic steroids in a pre-fight drug screen that was given January 9th by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, okay, prior to his fight with Nick Diaz. Now, the results of that were not made available until after the fight, which is another major issue I will address. Now, Kenny Florian was basically asked, okay, what does this news do for the sport of MMA? Okay, and his reply was, you know, it's a black eye for the sport, no pun intended. Okay, he goes on to say, and I quote, "We have some of our biggest stars testing positive for these drugs. It doesn't look good. And a lot of these guys are forgetting the martial arts in mixed martial arts, which means honor and courage. And these guys are forgetting about that, and they're playing around with these drugs, and it looks very bad for the sport." End quote. Okay, now let's look at some of the dangers of steroids in MMA. Now, steroids do not belong in any sport, okay? There's a reason that they are illegal, okay? It's because no one agrees with the fact that they should be legalized in sports, okay? The only people who think that are basically people who use steroids, okay? But the majority of people do not think that, and the stance of these organizations prove that people just don't buy that, okay? That's why they're illegal, okay? So let's look at some of the dangers of fighting people on steroids, okay? There are serious dangers, okay? You can be seriously injured from fighting a person who is taking performance-enhancing drugs, okay? Now, anabolic steroids and things like human growth hormone, EPO, these are the major problem, but there are other issues with this. So, for example, John Jones tested positive for cocaine in a pre-fight drug screen. It's not uncommon. Anyone who has been involved in the sport of boxing knows that, cocaine and amphetamines, fighters have been known to take them for fights. Now, another issue, okay, another thing that fighters do that people might not be aware of are they inject their knuckles with lidocaine, with a numbing agent, okay? And if you don't know what that is, it's basically if you got a cut and you had to go to the doctor, okay, they give you a shot to numb it, before they sew it up. That's what it is. And they inject it into their hands, okay? And that's usually how professional, experienced fighters wind up breaking their hand, is because they numbed it. They injected it with lidocaine, and then you can't feel when you punch. You can punch harder. You can punch, you can break your hand and not feel it. Okay? So, you can be seriously injured by fighting someone who's taking performance-enhancing drugs. Okay, now, whether you like him or not, okay, Ariel Helwani made a very good and important point that concerns all fans of MMA and people who want to see this sport continue and to remain and to progress, okay? Very important point. What he said is, first of all, MMA is arguably the most dangerous sport, okay? Yes, steroids do not belong in any sport. That's why they're illegal. But people have to understand there's a difference between doing steroids in bodybuilding, for example, and steroids in MMA. MMA is a combat sport. It's a combat sport where two people step into the ring and fight, okay? Now, what he said is, okay, basically, as soon as a tragedy happens, okay, basically, meaning as soon as someone is seriously injured, okay, in MMA, in cage fighting, okay, people are going to come out of the woodwork to try and shut the sport down, okay? So, the continued use of steroids in MMA will almost certainly ensure that someone is seriously injured, okay? Okay, those are some of the implications and dangers. I don't have time to address every single aspect, of steroids in sports. Okay, now, what can be done? Okay, in the aftermath of, Anderson Silva, the UFC held a major press conference. Okay, they had the CEO Lorenzo Fertitta was there, President Dana White, their chief financial officer. Okay, those were the three people on the panel. Okay, you can find this on the UFC's main page. Okay, you can also find audio of it here on YouTube. Okay, I encourage you to watch it. Please watch it if you are concerned with these matters. It's about an hour long. So let me try and hit on some of the main points. Okay, that because the UFC, basically they're trying to save face, given Anderson Silva's anabolic steroid use. So they want to implement, more stringent testing procedures and, all this stuff, more out of competition testing. That's where we need to catch these people, is out of competition, okay? Because anyone who knows anything about steroids knows that you cycle off of your steroids. Okay, so by the time competition comes, it's out of your system, but you still have the physical effects from the steroids. Okay, now they're essentially going to contract with a third-party organization to test all fighters of main card bouts as well as title fights. And they're also going to try and implement a random drug screen for all fighters. Okay. But there's a problem with that the CFO, Chief Financial Officer of UFC, admitted. He said there's no legal framework in place if a fighter tests positive for steroids on a UFC drug screen. There's nothing saying that the commission, the sports commission, whichever one they're dealing with, has to adopt, that those, they don't have to accept that, basically, and they don't have to penalize the fighter. It's basically not official, okay? We're basically being asked to just go on faith here, just have faith that all this will just work out, So, they're also advocating for harsher penalties. So, Lorenzo Fertitta said, he wants something like a 2-year or a 4-year suspension for fighters who test positive. But again, there's no legal framework in place, okay, to make that happen. Okay, now, there were some other major issues raised at the press conference. Okay. One of them is, one reporter asked, what if a title holder, what if a champion tests positive for steroids? What are the ramifications? What are the penalties for him? Okay, will you strip him of his title? Okay, Lorenzo Fertitta basically sidestepped the issue, and he never gave a definite yes to the answer. He never said, yes, if a champion tests positive for performance-enhancing drugs, he will be stripped of that title, and then there will be, an interim bout or something like that. Never said that. Secondly, another issue dealing with basically the same thing is someone asked, what if a ranked fighter, a fighter who has a ranking in the UFC, what if they test positive for performance-enhancing drugs? Will you remove them from the ranking? Basically, the issue was sidestepped, and there was no definite yes given to the question. Okay. Basically, this press conference was basically a way for the UFC to save face. That's it. These measures are basically just band-aids. Dana White constantly says, if you're doing PEDs, you will be caught. But that's just clearly not the case. That's not the case. I mean, let's take the issue of Anderson Silva. Okay, he tested positive, in a pre-fight drug screen, and those results were not made available until after the fight. Okay, now President Dana White and the UFC wants us to believe that, there was just some, misunderstanding, that the procedure didn't work right, and no one knew the results until after the fight. Well, I'll tell you what, if you buy into that argument, I think you're pretty naive. Okay, I think what that shows, and really what that did show, is really just how corrupt everything has become. Okay, now basically what the UFC needs to do is they need to adopt a no tolerance policy when it comes to steroids and performance enhancing drugs. A no tolerance policy, okay? Not this little slap on the wrist, not some solution where there's no legal framework for it, where we have to just take their word for it that this stuff's going to work out. A no tolerance policy. Okay, now, solutions, obviously, that's what we're talking about. Now, I will admit, that Victor Conte has a bit of a credibility problem, and I can understand why some people obviously don't like him. I can understand that 100%, okay, because he was involved in the Balco drug scandal, basically giving, this steroid, supposedly an undetectable steroid called the Clear, giving it to very high profile athletes, Olympic athletes, who were then stripped of their medals. Okay, now nevertheless, okay, Victor Conte does have valuable experience, okay, that these organizations need to use. Okay, he's offered to consult with both, WADA and USADA. If you don't know what that is, that's the World Anti-Doping Agency and the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, basically the two leading agencies who deal with this. Okay, and he's basically just given the cold shoulder. He knows the way steroids work, he knows the cycles that athletes are on, and he basically wants to help design better tests. He's advocating for more out-of-competition testing also. Okay, because all the experts agree that basically these drug tests are a joke. It's easy to get around them. Okay, now let's deal with a very specific issue that I'm sure probably many of you have never even heard before. Okay, everyone's heard that there's a myth out there. Okay, there's a myth that people buy into. Okay, a lot of them honest people buy into the myth that designer steroid development stays ahead of drug testing procedures. Okay, now that is a weak excuse. That's a very poor excuse, okay, for not wanting to eliminate steroids and performance enhancing drugs from sports. Okay, let's deal with the facts. Okay, a chemist, okay, a chemist who is educated in Florida or New York or California, they all receive basically the same essential education and training. Okay, it's like going to medical school. Whether you go to medical school in Florida or New York or California, when you become a doctor and you graduate, guess what? You all know the same things. Okay, it's no different for a chemist. Okay, the only place that really differs is when you get into graduate studies and you specialize basically in a field you want to, maybe virology, whatever. Now, here is what people have to understand. Okay, these chemists who are making these designer steroids, okay, these people are not turning the sun upside down. Okay, these people are not rearranging the standard model of particle physics. Okay, they are conducting basic chemical research. Okay, adding an oxygen atom or adding a certain molecule here and there. Okay, chemists who create these drugs, they're not smarter. You know, there's nothing better about them than the chemists who are employed in the anti-doping laboratories, okay? They don't have better equipment than them, okay? So it's basically to say that new drugs stay ahead of testing procedures. That's a poor excuse, okay? They don't want to come up with the proper procedures, okay? Let's just go with the fact, for argument's sake though, let's say that these designer steroids do stay ahead of drug screening procedures and knowledge. Well, regardless if that's the case or if it's not, here's what needs to be done, okay? These anti-doping agencies need to create a research and development department where their chemists make new steroids, where they research and make steroids just like these other people do, okay, where they research and make steroids just like these other people do, and they can log them in, okay, they can classify their chemical structure, and they can come up with a test to detect it. That's what needs to happen, okay? This is not rocket science. Okay, so I basically addressed some of the main issues. I can't address everything in this video. Please feel free to comment, okay? Don't be a clown, okay? And don't, you know, act a fool, okay? If you're gonna say something intelligent, okay? Another thing, do not use profanity, okay? If you use profanity or you act a clown, I'm going to take your comment off. This is a serious discussion, okay? So if you want to be a clown, go do it somewhere else, okay? But please feel free to comment, and if you want me to address a certain issue relating to this or something like that, please let me know, and, you know, maybe I will make another video. And thank you, everybody.